Hello and welcome to Real Estate Radio Denver, the most important hour of radio heard every Saturday right here on 710 KNUS. Thank you for joining me. I am your fill-in host today, Tom Gysin. Tom Souther, the regular host, is on some training in sunny San Diego, California. If you don't know much about the Real Estate Radio Show, it is a show dedicated to building Denver's housing market. Within every market, there are solutions as well as tremendous opportunities. You just need to know some trusted advice, and that's what you will hear every Saturday morning right here on 710 KNUS at 9 a.m. Today, we are joined by two very good guests. We think we have a nice show today. So I'd like to welcome in Bryan Zerr with Equity Colorado. How are you, Bryan?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome to the show. We also have Casey Butler, who I've known for a long time. Casey is a longtime agent. Casey, welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
And we also have one of our sales reps from Homestead Title, Tracy Throop. Tracy, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, so I think we have a neat show for everybody today. We're actually going to cover a variety of topics. I think we have quite a few different topics to discuss today, so please stay tuned with us. I think it will be an informative show. And like anything, you know what? The national news doesn't always convey what is happening in Colorado as in other parts of the market. And so really that's our goal, is just to explain to people what is happening here in Colorado and in different pockets of Colorado, because certainly there are areas that are doing better. There are areas that are doing worse. The Denver Metro is a lot different than the mountains, and we're just here to have some discussion to kind of fill you in and give you some trusted advice that you can be comfortable in making a decision, whether that be to sell a house, to refinance a house, to purchase a house, to buy a new build, to an existing, etc. And so, guys, you know what? Thank you again for being here. And I think let's kind of jump right in. Actually, Bryan, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your real estate experience?
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. I've been a real estate investor since fall of 2005. I've got a background as a CPA, working in public accounting, and then I realized my true passion was in real estate, and so I've been now a broker for just a little bit over a year, and I've gotten a lot of experience, and I'm always hungry to learn new things.
Awesome. And are you still investing yourself as well?
I do, yeah. Right now, not a great investing market. Even tax liens, which are the first investments that I ever gotten into, are pretty low just with the current Treasury yields. But yeah, I'm always looking for an opportunity, whether that be fix or flip or buy and hold.
And actually, that's funny. You mentioned about the tax liens. Maybe we'll touch on that here in a little while, because I do know that it's an interesting topic that a lot of people don't know much about. And even in my experience as a title person, I've had many of either agents or people ask me about getting into the tax sale side. So maybe something we'll talk about.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Casey, how about yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I actually jumped from the construction world into real estate a little over 30 years ago, and I've been at the same Remax office ever since. I have a team that operates with me, and we've had a long, good run through the ups and downs, and I've learned a lot and have done well.
That's great. And which Remax are you with?
Remax 100.
Yep, over at Lakewood, right? Yeah, and that's good. I know we've talked a little bit about Jim Weichelbaum, who's the broker owner of that Remax, and Jim is a very good broker that I think a lot of people have probably heard about somewhere along the way.
Absolutely.
Yep. So, and Tracy, we will include you here in just a bit, okay?
Sounds great.
Awesome. So let's kind of jump in. So the question, where are we? It's been about a month since I've been on the show here. Been gone myself a little bit, but how's the market, Casey?
Well, that depends, Tom. Depending on who you are in the market, what you're looking for, and where you are, and what price you range in, it's all over the board. We read the headlines that state, sales are up, inventory is down. Actually, inventory started to catch up a little bit this summer. Prices are up. All of those things are relative to a average price range. So, but when you split it up a little bit, the Denver Metro, almost half of all homes right now are under contract. So, that bodes well. And I've been tracking market statistics since 2000, so about 13 years very closely. The highest absorption I've seen ever was in April of 2000 at 55% absorption. So right now we're just shy of 90% of an all-time peak in market vitality.
Okay.
So we've made a good comeback, and that's in general. But now, if you've got a home over $1 million, that's a very different market. And we're talking about less than 15% of homes over $1 million are under contract. So if you're a buyer in the marketplace a year ago, you'd have been a kid in a candy store. This year, our buyers have been facing multiple offers. Anything in the entry level, under $300,000, multiple offers, getting beat out by cash investors. It's been brutal. For sellers, it's been,
fantastic.
And they went through some pretty rough years, so, they deserved a little reprieve.
Yeah, very
and they're
true.
getting it, but the pendulum's not swinging fast, but it is swinging.
So prices obviously we've seen a pretty decent rise in prices pretty much across Metro Denver, right? In the last, you correct me on this, but I would say that probably started aggressively kind of January of this year.
It did, which is an early start. Usually we look December and January for things to slowly start picking up. This was the strongest December and January I can remember.
Yeah, okay. Bryan, what about and your take?
No, I mean, really, I first started seeing the pendulum swing about a year and a half ago in the spring. We started to look at some properties. I had a dad who's an investor, and we were looking at properties, and we just started to start looking at properties in about June, and then we would put an offer. There'd be 2 or 3 other offers, and then come August, we still didn't have a property. We were still looking to get one, and then there were 10 offers, and the ball just kept going. That snowball just kept going downhill, and now we find ourselves in still a strong seller's market, but I think it's going to be evening out here before too long.
Well, and that's where I wanted to kind of go with that. I know we have some resources where we run some data and things like that, and we're at a point right now where it seems like that we're starting to see, if you're going to predict things for the last quarter here, that we've seen a little bit of a slowdown and I don't know if I want to say that as a slowdown or if it's just a slowdown in a increase, right? A lesser increase.
Yeah,
how would you guys see that?
I would call it a relaxing of the market.
Okay,
and really not even in a big way, but we definitely have felt over the last 30. Maybe 45 days that the craziness we went through this April, May, and June has relaxed.
Has relaxed a little bit. Okay. Well, I want to pick up on that topic here when we have to take a quick short break here, but that's what this is about. People want to know where we're at in the marketplace. So stay with us. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well as interest rates and what that has meant. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Denver. I am your fill-in host, Tom Gysin with Homestead Title. I am joined in studio here by Bryan Zerr with Equity Colorado, Casey Butler with Remax 100, and Tracy Throop, one of our people from Homestead Title. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
Hi, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, we'll get back into this. So we were just talking about the market and how we've seen a little bit maybe overall of a little bit of a softening of the market. I can't remember the word you used, Casey. Relaxing of the market, exactly. But as we were off air there, we were talking about let's kind of get into this, because I think it's a great point that you bring up, is that people have certainly known that inventories have been low, and so prices have gone up, and it has been an absolute seller's market. But to your point, Casey, is there there's different markets, and so let's drill down a little bit for the public out there to kind of give them not so much about we can't tell them exactly their market, but I think just that people need to be aware that there's many markets within the market, right? And so that agent is really important, because so often what you were saying is you can show up at a listing and somebody says, "Hey, I know it's hot and here's where I'm going," right? And you may have some different data. So
yes.
talk a little bit about the dichotomies.
And I know Bryan's got some data here too, and we don't probably want to drown the listener in data, but a lot of the confusion that the consumer runs into when we go on appointments, we meet with a new buyer, or we've got somebody calling in from out of state that wants to purchase a home here, or even make an investment for that matter, or we've got somebody that wants to sell a home. The information that they need in order to make a smart decision is, what's the reality of where you are, the price range you're in, the product you have, etc. So when it gets to let me just tell you a couple of comparisons here. I mentioned earlier that almost half of the Denver metro inventory is under contract. I live in Evergreen, Colorado, and the mountain foothills, a wonderful place to live and raise kids. It's terrific. but the market vitality there is significantly different than it is in Denver. While Denver's at 46% absorption, Evergreen is at 20% absorption. So now, still,
obviously a little higher end homes, but to that point, things are really not moving to that to the degree.
Well, and that's another relative piece is the price range of the home. So when you look at one thing that I found interesting when I was looking at data, Southeast Denver's almost 45% absorption. Washington Park is at 45% absorption. Sounds like one's consistent with the other, but the difference is the average price in Southeast Denver is $380,000, where the average price in Washington Park is $525,000. So for the $525,000 price range to be that at that absorption, that's a hot market.
That's a hot market.
Then we go over to a very unsuspecting area, Green Valley Ranch, that was developed by Oakwood Homes in the 2000s out near the airport. That market is off the charts. They are at 56% absorption with an average price of $184,000. Homes in that subdivision fly.
So, and an interesting question about that, as I do remember hearing back in the day that Green Valley Ranch was like a mecca of the foreclosure world when foreclosures were going on.
Big time. Yeah, there were some great buys again a year ago in neighborhoods like that, and now they're reaping the benefits.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, somebody buying in Washington Park over the last year, they're not going to see as much increase because it's stayed a strong market segment. But we really have to dig down into the individual markets. National Association of Realtors advertises real estate as local, and it's an understatement.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Brian, you have some statistics, right?
Well, I would put an exclamation point on that, and I would say it's hyper local. Without really diving down too much into the specific neighborhoods, I think it's interesting to note as you go to the north part of the Denver metro area, specifically Arvada and Broomfield on the west part of I-25. You're seeing very, very low inventory levels, 25% or greater, lower, 25 or greater, lower than a year ago. You jump over I-25, and so you're in, Brighton, Fort Lupton, Commerce City. You're seeing inventory levels that are 30% higher over there. So that's just kind of an interesting dynamic, but those are the two extremes on the market. And as you go south of I-70, you're seeing, a little bit more toned down numbers like that. But those are just kind of the extremes. The hottest in terms of days on market, homes are selling fastest in the Denver Northeast. Let's see, Douglas County, specifically Lone Tree, Highlands Ranch, very, very hot. And then finally like Littleton and then West Centennial.
And what do you know? This might be a general question, but average days on market across the board, is it, or maybe that's a bad question, but maybe like in Highlands Ranch, what is an average days on market?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I believe we actually hit, and it's been decreasing every month, metro area wide every month since February. And I'm just looking at my figures here, and we are currently at a 43 average days on market for the market as a whole. When you look specifically at the different regions, Denver Northeast region, that would be north of Colfax, east of Broadway. That is the fastest selling, and that's 21 days.
Yeah. Okay.
And keep in mind, a year ago, those days on market numbers were in the triple digits.
Great point.
The average days on market was in triple digits.
But again, it's interesting. So what I hear from you guys is, as I'm digesting this information, you're on the surface, you're saying, great, you know what? I'm going to sell my home and I'm going to price it high and it's going to fly, right? But that's not happening.
Yeah, well, it is happening a lot, but it's not happening all the time. It depends.
Depends on the area.
Yeah, you
got to know the area.
I had a meeting with somebody just a week ago, and he has a nice house listed right off of a golf course on a country club, and it was interesting because I happen to know the owner of that house, and they priced it, in his opinion, a little bit too high, and it hit like the stale, right? Now they've dropped the price twice. And they had offers before at that original amount. Where they had offers where it's priced now, right?
Yep.
But at the original amount, the seller said, no thanks, this is a hot market, etc. And now it's almost just turned into, he's like, I think that's going to expire at the end of August.
I know the who and the what property you're talking
you
about
do.
exactly.
Yeah.
And because I was speaking with that who yesterday about this, and we have similar, we have these listings that we think are going to...
Small world in Colorado here, isn't it?
We get listings that we think are going to, fly off the shelf or at least get a good showing, and then suddenly they don't. Or an offer comes in the first day, as it did in that case, or the second day, and the seller thinks, I can do better, and they let that buyer go, and then 3 months later, they've hardly had another showing, and they're going, oops.
Yes, and
it happens
honestly,
so often. Sellers never believe that story, but it happens so often. It's tragic.
And unfortunately, it's like the stock market, right? We don't have a crystal ball, so you don't know when that first buyer comes in in an hour or 2 days after it goes on the market. Natural instincts are thinking, well, heck, this came in fast. Maybe we aimed a little bit low here, right? And then boom, nothing again.
Yeah. And thanks for mentioning the crystal ball, because there was a time when we could forecast a little further into the future, but today it's impossible. And there's so much instability. Economically, you hear the naysayers and the doomsayers about what's going to happen next. And all we can do is check the foundation on a regular level, on a regular basis, and see what's a reasonable expectation for the near period. And, real estate's a long-term hold, safe bet. Always has been, always will be. Whether we hit another down 2 years from now or whether we don't, it's still a good long-term hold.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, that's a great point, Casey. I mean, and to our listeners out there, you're talking with a lender and they're saying, rates are going to skyrocket or rates are going to go down or whatnot. I mean, let's just be honest. No one knows exactly what's going to happen. No one has a crystal ball. As what was just mentioned, no one knows what prices are going to do. We have a somewhat of an idea, but do not put too much stock in that, because it's probably going to change.
Yeah, I was just reading some stuff just the other day about the economy, and somehow I got onto these two articles that were doomsday articles, and it was like, oh my God, are we prepared for the end, right? I mean,
I was reading too. Me and Evan were, and I was about to jump off the building, our 6-story building, because I'm thinking, oh gosh, I better find a new career.
Yeah, but you know what? It's so funny. Then you know what? You talk to some other experts in that field, right? And you have it's like anything. You have an economist over here, an economist over here, and they completely disagree, right? And so I think that's a good point. Casey is over. Historically, housing has been a very safe bet, and it certainly can go up and down. We've definitely seen more ups than downs.
Yep. Absolutely. And you can certainly see enough of what's happening right now that for those that are doing fix and flips, it's easy enough to see where you're in, where you're out, what your expectations are. The people that get hurt the worst in real estate are the ones that are just overly optimistic. They're betting the farm that this thing's going to run, the way it's running today, it's going to run that way for 2 more years. Right. And those are the ones that get bit.
Because you can actually make some mistakes and still be saved by an appreciating market, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially a rapidly appreciating market.
Yes.
But to your point, I think that's great. I used to buy, a bunch of different properties, and my thought always was whatever I thought that I could, make out of that property, I always cut it in half. And then I said, can I live with that? And if I lived with that, then I thought this one's a good deal. But when it was, hey, I think I can squeak this out of it, you lose. You take a bath.
Yeah, as an investor, and I'm sure, Brian, you'll agree, you have to have some patience and you have to have some diligence if you really want to, be able to depend on that profitability.
So, question for you guys. So, if I'm a seller and I'm interested in selling my home, you can bring me current information on my specific market that will help guide a seller as to whether this thing is still increasing, this thing is still decreasing, it's staying flat, where it's moving. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. And I think I have to qualify that with, you have to have a good agent to be able to do that sort of thing, someone who knows how to dive into the numbers and extract that data. But absolutely, agents have access to an unbelievable amount of information that the public, quite frankly, doesn't have access to. But you can see things.
And current data, it's so funny. I had a meeting with somebody just the other day, and she brought it up. We do have some of that data that we can provide as well, that we subscribe to from different parties, right? Research companies, etc. And her point was, you know what? I love this because this is giving me an indicator of what's happening today. and possibly a predictor of what's happening tomorrow versus, reading the Schiller index, right, that might say, hey, this is what happened last 60 days, right? We don't care what happened the last 60 days, right? Yeah. So, that's important because, how do you guide somebody? We have about a minute and a half here, Casey, so when somebody wants to price their home, you had talked a little bit about, there's a lot of ways to price a home too.
Well, most definitely. And, it all starts with, I had an interesting visit with my business coach the other day, and he was talking about the Rockefeller principles in business and that, the current, the past, the present, where is the most important information right now? And he said 80% of it's right now. And 10% past, 10% future. You want to look at those things, but you got to base it in the right now. And Bryan really brought up a good point about all the information that's available, because that is also another source of confusion. The public has access to more information than they've ever had through Zillow and Trulia and every other self-appointed, real estate information source. So getting to the real thing, I've always said there's lies, there's damned lies, and there's statistics. And in that order, they will deceive you. So you can make statistics say anything you want. I try and get statistics that tell me what's not, what is going on, rather than having myself look for the statistic to support what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, so basically, you don't want, that's a great point. You don't want to have a preconceived vision and then say, can we back into that? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So we have about 20 seconds left, and so I don't want to get too much into full-fledged conversation here. So let's pick this up right when we come back, and we'll talk. We're going to kind of stay on this, and then we're going to divert into a couple other topics on where people can go and what are still some opportunities in the market.
Perfect.
Okay, join us when we come back. Thank you. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Denver. I am your host, Tom Gysin with Homestead Title. Thank you for joining us here, where we are heard every Saturday morning on 710 KNUS at 9 a.m. I'm joined in studio by Casey Butler with Remax 100 and Bryan Zerr with Equity Colorado, and one of my cohorts, Tracy Throop. Tracy, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Great. Hey, we were just talking before the break there about information overload, and it's such an important topic because I was reading on this. I mean, there are so many sites that people can go to these days to try to get information, right? And we always say, hey, if it's on the internet, it must be true. And so, you see all this stuff. And I was actually reading an article last night. I can't seem to find it here, but it's amazing how it was talking about the sites like Zillow and Trulia and how much money and where their stock price has soared to in the last year. So these companies are making a lot of money, but I don't think a lot of people realize out there that, they provide this data, but then they're a lead source. And they're selling those leads that people are when they're going and registering, they're selling those leads to agents, really, is what agents or lenders and things like that. And that's where their money is derived, right? But it's amazing. They have done well, and I guess good for them on that. But to that point, where should somebody go to start this process? Is Zillow a safe place to go?
Yeah, I think just with anything, you go to the source of the information. Personally, for me, if a client asks me where to go first, I would tell them to go to recolorado.com. That is the basically the public-facing website of the MLS. So basically anything that gets updated in the MLS for us agents, it gets updated in RE Colorado for the public. And so basically the Zillows, the Trulias, they get all of that information from the MLS syndicated over to those websites, and so they get that after a little bit after the fact. Versus if you go to RE Colorado, it's right there for you.
Okay, Casey.
Well, Zillow's an interesting phenomenon. You mentioned how much their stock is up since their IPO. Zillow is really the crack cocaine to information addicts for real estate because there's so much information there. The problem is not all of it's accurate. When their estimate of value on homes is based on algorithms that are based on data that they pull from public sources, and it's just not It's just not the kind of data and information that really deciphers value that we do at the street level. At the same time, they report the solds. That's accurate. That's useful. They have articles. That's useful. But their real purpose is to sell advertising and to aggregate leads that they sell back to real estate agents.
That is their purpose.
That's their model. Trulia as well. Realtor.com is another big source of good real estate information, and it's owned by the realtors. So it's a little more credible in that respect. Well, Brian's shaking his head. You're right. It was sold also privately, but the real information has to be boiled down by somebody that knows how to, take the local information and apply it to that individual property or buyer or whatever the objective is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think we talked right before break about, you try not to back into something, but unfortunately in today's age, you get online and you get a preconceived notion of all of a sudden, like, the Zestimate is $600,000. That's what I can get, right? Yep. And you sort of build everything around that, right? And so often I think people kind of jump into that. Well, that's great. Let's sell this for this. We can go out and do, go shop for this, etc. And then maybe there's a little bit of a letdown when you go in and say, here's the true data.
Yeah, and I can't remember the facts and figures off the top of my head, but it was something to the effect of those things. Those numbers are 10%, plus or minus 10%, correct, like 80% of the time. Like,
it's funny.
My goodness.
I saw a 60-minute special, like this is like 2 years ago on Zillow. And they said, we can only be so accurate, right, on such a large scale. And I think to your point, it was like when they were 20% or less accurate, that was great. And if it was at some places they were 80% inaccurate. And
it's worthless.
It's worthless. Yeah,
and dangerous, in fact.
But how funny! But yet, I should have bought their stock. They're up like seriously 300%. I think is what they said. So, how come my broker never tells me about those?
I know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, okay. So let's talk a little bit. The role of an agent, right? I think this is actually a great question because I'm just going to ask. I'll just turn it over to you guys and get your opinion as to what the role of an agent is and then I'll add my 2 cents of what I think people often think.
Absolutely. And I'm really interested to get Casey's thoughts on this because I might be a little bit of an outlier on this. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, my background's a CPA, and basically what a CPA does, as you know, is they audit the financial statements of a company for pension funds, for retirement accounts, and so has a very, very important impact on all of us because that's our financial livelihoods. Well, similar to a CPA, a real estate agent guide you through a transaction in the largest purchase you will probably ever make. And so as I look at a CPA that will make sure that the financial statements are correct, your real estate agent should know a lot about the transaction. And some agents say, we're just there to market property. I disagree. I think that we're obligated, in my opinion, and maybe this isn't correct through door, but I think we're obligated to know about the lending process very, very well, so that if the lender screws up, we can be the first ones to identify it. I mean, case in point, I'm still a relatively new agent, but at the same time, first buyer I ever worked with, he didn't get his GFE. I asked him a couple weeks after he was. We were under contract, and I asked him, did you get your GFE? And he said,
that's the good faith estimate.
That's the good faith estimate. Yeah, thanks, Tom. And so that's required to be given out 3 days after the loan application. And he said, no, I haven't seen it. And so I followed up with the lender, and the lender's like, oh my gosh, yeah, you know what? The file just got pushed under some other stuff, and we need to get that out. I just said, are you kidding me? Things like that happen all over the place. An inspection, realtors are not inspectors. We are not trained in that. But at the same time, if you're looking at a house for the first time and you see mold, you should be able to identify mold. So before you even put an offer in on the contract, you see that. I just had a deal a month ago where we're going through one of my buyers' condos that he put an offer on, and I found something in the ceiling that the inspector didn't see, and it was just a little slight discoloration. I just said, sir, you might want to look at that. He used his moisture meter, and sure enough, it was a roof leak. So, I think that we're obligated as brokers, maybe not by law, but in the best interest of our clients, that we're going to know as much about that transaction as we can.
Casey?
Well, and it's much to the question of what we are is the question what we are not. and we are not professional home inspectors. We are not, there was a day when I used to qualify my buyers, pre-qualify and do all that, but the lending world has changed so dramatically. I am no longer qualified to do that.
Right.
So when it comes to qualifying my buyers and knowing what their options are, I send them to, lenders that I know are competent in that area. On home inspections, our policy is when our buyer's doing a home inspection, is that we don't attend the home inspection because inevitably they're going to ask us questions about the home that we're not qualified to answer. There's a crack, it doesn't look like much. I don't know. An engineer might say it's not much, and I have a construction background, so I do know the answers to a lot of these questions, but I'm going to let a professional answer the question. We've had
so
there's all kinds of mold.
Need to be prepared to make to inspect a property and pay for a good inspector.
Absolutely. And the first thing I tell every buyer and seller I work with is, you're the boss. I am technician, I am advisor. You don't have to take my advice like your doctor. But I'm just going to tell you what my experience and my knowledge tells me about the decision you're making. And sometimes those are long and occasionally heated conversations. But in the end, they're the one that is either going to benefit or not benefit by taking that advice. So I need to make sure I'm giving them good advice so that they can make good decisions, that I point them to the right professionals to answer the questions I'm not qualified to answer.
And that's where the relationship comes in with your title company, your lender, right? All of those things. I mean, being in the business for as many years as I have, it really boils down to that relationship and who you can trust outside of just being the agent, right? So that's very important.
And relative to even, Bryan mentioned the moldy inspection issues, title insurance is something that the public cannot possibly understand how title insurance works and what all of that is about. But when we get a title policy, we examine it. We're looking for red flags. We're looking for liens or encumbrances on the property. We're helping that seller get them cleared up. We're helping that buyer protect themselves. And without some guidance in those areas, it can be very costly.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, couldn't agree more. So we need to take, I want a couple more questions on this, but we'll take a quick break here, and we will come back, and we will continue. So thank you very much. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Denver. My name is Tom Gysin. I am filling in for the absent Tom Souther today. We are joined in studio by Casey Butler from Remax 100 and Bryan Zerr with Equity Colorado. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Yep, and I think we're having some really good conversations. So I want to jump back into this. We were asking in the last segment there about the role of an agent, because I do think that people view an agent as kind of multifaceted, and certainly, and I think to some degree that's great that a good agent has good knowledge across the board, but that doesn't mean that is their role, right? They need to have a lender, they need to have a title company, they need to have an inspector, an appraiser, etc. And you are really coordinating all of these facets, right? And getting this thing moving through, and your understanding of most of these facets. But again, you're not, Casey, you might have more in the construction world, but a lot of agents aren't going to know anything about construction, right?
Well, the construction world's changed in the last 30 years too.
Good point.
There's a lot I know, and that also brings something else to a qualified agent that you want to work with, and that's one who is keeping up with the changing environment, the changing information, that is updating their education. Because what I knew, being 30 years in real estate almost goes against me, because whatever I learned in my first 10 years of real estate is irrelevant, except for the experiences. But the knowledge I have to continue to update. We need continuing education, and we need to go beyond what the state requires. It's not enough.
Yeah, good point, if you're fully vested. So we're talking role of the agent, and I know I get this question asked. I mean, my brother-in-law's asked me this recently. They're buying a new build and moving back, and they asked, do I need an agent? Do I really need an agent on this new build? Right? Casey, yes. You've got a good answer and a good story.
Well, yeah, actually, I mean, there's a lot that an agent brings to the table, and it's not always just negotiating a price. In fact, sometimes it's not negotiating. Sometimes it's just helping them get the house. Sometimes my advice to a buyer is go $10,000 over asking price. Okay, so when we get into situations where we're in a bid, that's happened a lot in the last year. But when it comes to new construction, again, we get to apply our experience on what could possibly go wrong here. One of the biggest is that we always recommend that a buyer of a new home gets their own inspector, an independent inspection of the property just prior to walkthrough. Because even though it's been approved by the city inspectors or the county inspectors, that doesn't mean that they caught everything. So we're closing one on Monday. And the funny thing is, I mean, the new home market is really emerging again right now, where it's been
Flat.
soft, very flat.
Yeah, very standard.
I'm actually closing my first new construction sale in over 2 years.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that at all.
On Monday, and it's been kind of fun, and this is a good builder. But we did have the inspection done, and when it came back, they noticed that the detectors that they put outside the bedroom were smoke detectors, but they weren't carbon monoxide detectors. So that's required by law. Obviously, it's a safety issue.
That's a new thing, by the way, right?
It's just new in the last 2 years that it's required by law. Yep. But it's something that, in passing up, there's your thing up there. So it looks like we got that, but it was the wrong thing, and the inspector caught that. I've had inspectors find open electrical conduits in the attic of a home. So there's a lot of things that they might catch that the builder or the other inspector missed, and they might be minor, they could be major.
And the other inspector, you mean like the city inspector?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's great. And what are you finding, I guess, great question. What are you finding from the builder? Are they, on a smoke detector, I'm assuming they're like, oh, absolutely, the code requires it, we need to change it, right? Are you finding like electrical wires, do they say, nah, hey man, it passed inspection, we're good?
Well, if it's something subjective, then they could push back and say, well, that's the way it is, and the buyer either accept it or don't buy it. Or, one thing with builders is, in the end, they can say, this is what we're giving you what we said we would, buy it or don't buy it.
Right.
And when in a rising market, they will often do that.
Would a buyer have an out at that point in time, literally due to that inspection?
It could actually end up in court if it's something that's gray. If it's clearly a code defect, then the builder is just going to fix it. But if something that they think that the paint is uneven from room to room, or something that is arguable, then the builder's not easily going to let go of that earnest money. They'll let the buyer walk, but they'll keep their money. And it's a lot of money with a new home construction.
Yeah, it sounds. What I'm finding right now is, there's with my brother-in-law buying a place. They said, hey, put down your earnest money, and as soon as you put it down, it is non-refundable.
Absolutely,
and that's a good thing for the listeners to know. There's the standard real estate contract that we use on all of the pre-owned or
resale
homes, exactly, and those contracts are completely different when you're buying a new home. Those are very, very geared and favorable to the builder. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay. So, have we? What about? Have we covered the role of the real estate agent? What about lender? You're really not. You don't think you should be guided as a lender, do you?
No, but at the same time, I think that the 24 hours that we're required to get every 3 years as real estate agents is, Casey made a great point. That's ridiculously low. These are huge investments. I think we need to have a lot more education requirements. I don't think that as real estate agents we need to be lenders, but at the same time, I think that we, at least if we want to be responsible stewards of the transaction, I think we should know, know when something may be going wrong. We don't need to know exactly, everything about the transaction, but we need to know those little details so maybe we can, help save our client from, maybe not closing the transaction.
Well, I agree, and that's why you made the point, I think, maybe during the break about a good faith estimate that's required by a lender to show a buyer what their estimated closing costs are so there are no surprises. How many times do lenders take that loan application and not give them the good faith estimate? So as a buyer's agent, for our clients, we tell the buyer, once you've done your loan app, give us the good faith estimate, let us have a look at it. And I've had times when I've looked at that and said, these prices that they're charging are pretty exorbitant
compared to the market.
Compared to what other lenders are doing. You might want to shop lenders at this point, or you might want to go back to this one and say, this is too much.
Yeah,
and we found mistakes too. Everybody makes mistakes. Double checking each other just makes the whole thing more reliable.
Yeah. This one, I know on this one builder that my brother-in-law's working with, they did refer him to a lender, but it really wasn't their lender. It was just a referral out, and they weren't really giving any incentives to use that lender, right? And not this. I know the person; he's a good guy, but it does pay to compare.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, you never know.
And at the end of the day, we're agents. We are representatives of you. An inspector is an independent party, but are they there to represent you? No. Lenders, are they there to represent you? No, they're not. I love our title companies, but at the same time, they're independent as well. And so I think you just, when you're going through that process, you should understand that all these parties are there to help you close a transaction, but they're not advocates on your behalf.
Well, and I want to clarify something with respect to that, too, because we are not an advocate until you hire us to be your advocate. Real estate agents do not work for anybody until we're hired to do so. So when I list a home, put my sign in the yard, I represent that seller. I am their fiduciary. When I have a buyer that I'm going to take and show homes, the state, by default, makes me a transaction broker, which means I don't represent them. And I don't represent the seller either. I'm pretty much representing my own interests, but I'm going to be fair and honest with them. But when I sign a buyer agency, when that buyer commits, I'm going to work with you, then I commit that all my fiduciary obligations are to you. I'm going to look out for your interests. That's called a buyer agency agreement. And then I am your advocate, and I'm going to cover, I'm going to watch your back in every possible way.
It's a great point, Casey. And buyers, that's why you want to get that signed up front. That even though you might not want to commit to an agent, make it a one-day commitment, but sign that. Great point.
Well, so the question on that is that I have always wondered that a little bit, is that you enter, I hire you as an agent to sell my home, and your interest is to represent Tom Gysin to sell my home.
Yes.
And somebody comes unrepresented and says, I want to write an offer, and all of a sudden the state now says, Casey, you can't represent Tom anymore.
The state does not say that. The state says that person is a customer, and I'm going to still represent you, Tom, and they're going to be a customer, and I'm going to help them buy your house. Now, if that person happened to be someone that came to me and said, help me find a house, and signs a buyer agency, and I have your house listed and yours is the right house, that's when the state says you can't, be a master, a servant to two masters.
Okay.
And so then we are asked to go neutral and become a transaction broker in that transaction.
If they haven't signed a buyer agency, though,
they're a customer.
You are still obligated to the seller.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the reason I bring that up is this. You're bringing back bad memories for me here, Casey.
Sorry.
I had a deal years ago that was a pop top down in Wash Park that I was doing with some partners, and deal went kind of bad, and had some bad partners that took some money. And long story short is I was losing on this deal, and I hired an agent, and she did a lot of business in that area, and somebody came to her and said, you know what, hey, I'm interested in writing an offer on this property here. And I'd like you to, kind of be the I guess called the neutral party, if you will.
Transaction broker.
Transaction, but they wanted a little reduced commission. They wanted their offer was submitted low, basing that maybe there could be some lesser commissions paid because there wouldn't be another agent involved, and it was funny, and so she said, well, you know what, go find yourself another agent, and I'd rather pay the 2.8% co-op, and for a seller, I was like, well, I thought you were representing me, and that we were trying to get a deal to the table, and unfortunately it collapsed, and so we ended up parting ways simply from the fact that I felt like she wasn't representing me as a seller anymore. Does that make sense?
Well, I understand, and there's a lot of deviations and variations, and especially when the consumer comes in and starts reaching for the agent's commission also, because it's not a deal between this buyer and the agent or the seller and the agent. It's between the buyer and the seller, and the agent is agreed to be paid for selling the house. So then it becomes a three-way transaction, and that gets
sticky.
It does.
So for those of you out there that are just, your head wants to explode because you're like transaction broker, agent.
Good point.
90, greater than 90%, 95% of transactions use agents versus transaction broker. Do you think that's accurate, Casey?
Yes. I know. I'd say definitely plus or minus 90%. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the message is a good point because we're probably confusing people, but is the fact that you can absolutely be represented by an agent all the way through, really, right? And unless you presented to them and said, "Hey, I have a buyer here, and this is where this would have to go," and they can pick and choose, right?
Yeah, and it is much to your benefit to do so. The seller pays the commission, so there's no cost to a buyer to have a buyer's agent represent them. The only thing is you want to make sure you have a good agent. And so, yes, you might want to give them a trial period, maybe if they're just looking for a day, or give them a couple of days. If you're not comfortable, move on. If you are comfortable, then give them the extension, so the agent then has the security of knowing that you're a client that they can invest in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So do me a favor, guys. I want to make sure that people have your information, and we have about a minute here. So, Bryan, why don't you just give out your information if anybody wants to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I specialize in Greenwood Village. It's kind of my territory, but also the whole Denver metro area as well. You can reach me at denverhomeexpert@gmail.com, or Bryan with a Y, BryanSellsDenver.com.
Okay. How about you, Casey?
Well, and I actually do work the entire metro area, have for 30 years. I live in Evergreen, so do a lot of business in the foothills. But you can probably best things, go to my website, thehometeam.com, and get all the information, contact me, see our listings and our services.
Yep, that's great. Well, I really thank you both for being here. And honestly, I think this has been a really nice show and some good topics. I hope people got some good information out of it. As I've mentioned in the past, too, is, you know what, we are with Homestead Title, and we service all of Denver as well, really all of Colorado. But if you need any help, if you need any, just even some of the research stats that we talked about, you're more than welcome to get a hold of us, too, at www.homesteadtc as in titlecompany.com, and we're happy to help, and we will see you here next week. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful.
Thank you much, Tom.
Thank you, Tom and Tracy.
Thanks.